So it's a snow day here in MD area, and so I'm sitting at home catching up on a few of my favorite YouTube subscriptions, and of course I come across the Peculiar Kind's first episode of their second season, which talks about bisexuality. And I thought it was very interesting. I loved it because people tend to think that there's like biases within the heterosexual community, but to see that there's biases within um, LGBTQ community is very eye opening. But I kind of knew that to a certain degree, but because I know that it's a subset of, I guess, traditional society where there's heterosexual relationships, and even within the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of the same thing that exists in the overall society that exists there, maybe even in a microcosmic sort of way, if that's a word. It may not be, but I made it up. Don't jack me. Um, but I thought it would be interesting to answer, just to talk about bisexuality and in my effort to kind of open up that discussion around sexuality, LGBTQ stuff, and to people who watch me who may fall into every single category on the planet, since I think gender identity is becoming so fluid nowadays, and which speaks to, and all these labels are becoming very confusing, which speaks to the oppressiveness of the society that we live in, that people have to self-identify in order to fit into a particular group or a particular sort of way, or a particular pocket of society. And I think that in and of itself is oppressive, you know. In any case, so the questions around bisexuality was, what do you think about bisexuality? Do you consider yourself bisexual? He was talking, to the women who are stars on the Peculiar Kind. And for those of you who do not know, the Peculiar Kind is focused on women of color who identify as lesbian, bisexual, gay, and it basically asks honest questions, and they have like real life discourse, and it's on camera and they capture it. So it's like a documentary style thing. And the reason why I started watching it is because in corporate media, you tend to see lesbian women in only associated with men's ideas, men's fantasies, of what they think. And just it just seems to be like they're an object for heterosexual men's desires. Oh, we have two lesbians. Let's see them kiss on screen or do touch each other's boob and things like that. And so I found that I didn't know very much about it, and I really hated the way they were being depicted. So so when I found the Peculiar Kind, and I saw these discussions, I was just like, yes, this is so refreshing to see like the realness around it. And even though they have discussions around things from sex, from politics, to just being chill, I really enjoy, what's being said on the channel, and I appreciate it. So when they started talking about bisexuality, I was just like, let me put my 2 cents in as a heterosexual woman, a person who identifies as a heterosexual, and my whole thought process, and which was shared by a lot of the women who were on the video, was that when you think about somebody who's bisexual, you think of them as a person who is on the fence, doesn't know what they want to do, kind of greedy. It makes you uncomfortable because you don't know how to be around them for some people. And it's just like you tend to think of them in a more lascivious type of way. Like they're trying to scheme, and they're trying to get into your, in a lascivious sexual type of way. So they're trying to scheme and get into your pants, and they're confused, and you just can't really take them seriously. And I think that it's across the board. And one of the other questions was, would you, I don't know if it was a question, but I think I took it on as a question, is if would I date or consider somebody as who is bisexual as a partner? And my answer is no. As a heterosexual woman, I want a man who knows he's heterosexual and wants to be with the opposite sex, and more specifically wants to be with me. So I'm not a fan of somebody who just wants to be with everybody in the whole damn world, unless it's something that we agreed upon. But usually when you seek out somebody who you want to be with, you want to be with them for the rest of your life if you decide that you want to get serious with them. And that's just a general feeling, emotions that come up. But when you're dealing with somebody who's a bisexual, who who very honestly likes both men and women, how can you be serious with that person when you only fall into one of those categories, where this person may have an urge to be with somebody of the same sex? And for me, that's uncomfortable, because it puts you in a position of an oppressor. Like if you say to this person that we are together, you're with me, you cannot go out and deal with anybody else. And specifically, if they have the urge to be with somebody of a different gender, that's very oppressive, because then you're saying that you can't fulfill that urge. And I feel like, or that want or that need to be with somebody, because honestly, a woman offers something different than what a man will offer. And so, like, saying that to somebody who is a bisexual male who wants to be with me, I think it's very difficult to say that and like really not, and feel good about myself and feel like I'm not, trying to limit this person. And I think a person that's in that situation, it's a fault of both people. Like, if a bisexual male says, okay, yeah, I'm with you forever, I'm not going to deal with anybody else, and he accepts it as the truth, but knows that's not really the truth, because that's going to only end up in a bad way. And again, with the heterosexual person saying that you're with me, you can only be with me, you kind of know it's going to end up in a bad way as well. Because I think just as people who, as human beings, we don't end up being with the same person. We change. We may be with somebody for years, but we might change our idea of what we want in 10 years. And so even within a heterosexual community, that happens. So imagine where you are dealing with somebody who's bisexual and may want something else from somebody else who is of the opposite sex, but also might want that would most likely want that from somebody who's the opposite, but is the same sex. So I think in general, the idea of bisexuality is very confusing to a lot of folk, and it is very uncomfortable to deal with. Yeah, I think it is. I mean, there's so many labels, there's so many, sexual identities now, like gender identities that really, I mean, LGBTQ is just going to end up being LGBTQXYZWSR53. I think in like 3 years, because like I said, I think it's becoming very fluid, these gender identities, which speaks to the oppressive nature of the system that we live in, that people have to label themselves. But there's so many people who don't fit into any of those categories, who just want to be human beings and don't want to be labeled, and don't feel a need to have to identify and tell somebody what they are all the time. And I give people credit who avoid doing that. And one more thing about bisexuality, I feel like if you are a heterosexual person that's dealing with somebody who's bisexual, and people know that that person is bisexual, then what's going to be called into question is your sexuality, I think. People are going to funnel that back. So like, oh, so you're dealing with somebody who's bisexual, then that means that you aren't whatever it is that you say you are. You allow your partner to be this way. That means you must be funny too, or fancy. This is my moniker for fancy. And some people aren't strong enough to really deal with that. I mean, I don't care, but some people aren't really prepared to take on that sort of questioning. And yeah, so that also might come back and be another reason why somebody wouldn't want to deal with a bisexual person. And in the case, I feel like you're limiting and you're targeting, and bisexuality has now become this thing that the pariah of both societies, and so like that's why labels should just be disappeared altogether, because then you target people based on their sexual preference, But yeah, anyway, so this was an attempt to kind of open up the discussion amongst people who watch my videos, who actually care, who I do understand that since it's going to be somebody who's going to post underneath my video, I'm like, oh my God, it's the end of the black race because we have all these gay people running around. Y'all noticed. So I know there's people who are going to be like, oh my God, they're going to quote some Bible verses or some Quranic verses or some Hebrew verses or some shit like that. But anyway, so this is an attempt to open up the discourse and discussion, and maybe post anything down below and what your ideas or your thoughts are on bisexuality.